Oops, I was realizing that I was not on mic. So we are live. We are on mic. It's amazing. It's part of the blessings of me being live. And here is Mr. J. Welcome, welcome. It's great to see you. And I decided to run my show already in advance. And so we are linked on YouTube, live on YouTube, and we are live on LinkedIn. And before I yield the mic to Mr. J, I am blessed to check that I'm live on LinkedIn and YouTube and that I present the one and only storyteller strategist who released his amazing book. And as always, I was making some visuals, the some visuals to outline. And this chapter is I was a bit less stressed because this chapter there is a lot to say, but it's not so much packed as the four previous rules. So it's I was able to round it up. As always, procrastinating and not reading the weekend. I was reading it 1 or 2 hours ago, but last week's 1 or 2 hours ago, I was, "Woo, let's quickly read it because it was a so the fifth rule of storytelling, engagement in storytelling, show don't tell, painting with this description, dialogue, the power of engaging the audience, pitfalls and perils, ooh, target practice, narrative navigation, and then at the end we might talk about the 6 and the 7 rules that will come next week. So, Mr. J, first, how are you feeling today? Welcome.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. You know, recently the biggest story here in America was the Super Bowl and who won. Um, so that was the biggest story around here. But I wanted to just kind of talk to you um, about a portion of the Super Bowl. Two things. One, um, it was really expected for a particular team to win, right? And uh, it was touted as a potential three-peat. And by the way, that phrase three-peat is owned and copyrighted, I think, and trademarked rather, right, uh, by a a former coach for the Lakers. And really, it was about repeating them going to the playoffs for the third time. So it's a three-peat. Anyway, that's another story. They did not do a three-peat. The underdog, in this case, won. And so um, there's a lot of discussion about that. But the other part of it was the halftime show, which there was a lot of symbolism in the performance. And really, the reason, I think, one of the reasons that it was a little bit poignant is because in America, uh, February traditionally you celebrate Black History Month, and so some of the lyrics in the rap song by the performing artist um, essentially honors and respects Black history, um, the history and the ancestry of the performing artist himself, Kendrick Lamar, who recently won a Grammy. But there's so many different layers of symbolism in there. You just have to kind of catch it. But and that's a whole other story. But the reason I want to bring that to the attention of the audience is, along with the lyrics, the way to bring that home for some people is to give you a visual, something that people can look at and correlate the lyrics to. And so, really, that's what the fifth rule of engagement boils down to. And so, there's a quote from me at the start of the chapter, and it's convey information and emotions through actions, descriptions, and dialogue. Now, allow for readers or audiences to engage and experience the story more vividly and personally. You know, there's usually that question of, how do I show people if I'm writing words down instead of telling them? That doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. Really, and that's part of the first chapter, really, of this, actually the second chapter, painting with descriptions. And so that, to me, is how you do this. You paint a picture with your words. That's exactly what I was trying to accomplish in this. So I just wanted to start off with that. And if you have any questions about any sort of symbolism regarding the halftime performance, I'll be glad to answer that. But really, that's Kendrick also, with his lyrics, has a way of painting a picture with his actions and with what he says. So really phenomenal lyricist, which was why he probably won the Grammys and the Grammy that he won. So I just, wanted to talk a little bit about that in relation to the fifth rule of engagement. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was not watching the Super Bowl, but I got a lot of because at the same time, LinkedIn is my news, and I'm connected with amazing variety of people, especially in US. And I'm not going too much in politics, but there are lots of going on these days with the big Donald decision. But I think it's more important that we can also create a story, paint a picture of opposition through art, because at the same time, it's to allow people to express. It's the first freedom, I think, to allow people to express their disagreement, their way that they see the scene, and that the freedom of expression is critical. Few weeks ago, I was aware about the resignation of a famous cartoon artist because she was drawing a cartoon, and the newspaper says, no, you are not allowed to show that because it was depicting the main actors in the tech kissing the ring of the big Donald. And so she decided, if it's like that, I'm going to resign because I don't work with censorship. And so for me, it's about being able to express the decisions. There are things that are decided that is not in our control, but at the same time, it's about what we respond. And that's why show and tell is really important. And what I like, I wrote a lot of things, by the way, as always. Description: brush strokes on the canvas of imagination. And I do the visual because, like, for me, it reminds me Bob the Squipant, like with the imagination, painting the rainbow, the famous rainbow I was painting on the visual. And so it's about painting with words. That means that it's a dance. Which word are we going to use? And not to lose our readers. Because at some point, if we are using complex words, we might lose them. But at the same time, it's using the blessings of a great vocabulary. Like there is red, yellow, and green. And then there is orange and purple and dark navy blue. And the more colors you have, the better. So the more words you know, the better, because you can also teach them these words. I was almost 10 years ago, I was reading one of the amazing book, Magic, from Rhonda Byrne. And it was like a practice of 28 days of, and the first day was gratitude. And I learned new words in English. AWE. And flittering, like the butterfly flittering. And so the more you know words, the better. But also it's to know which words to use, which words to avoid to use. Um, and before I yield the mic, I was thinking also about even using one and only color is powerful. I don't know if you know this artist. He passed away a few years ago at the honorable age of 100 years old, but he was known by the fact he was only painting black paintings. But the way he painted black, the color that was reaching the painting was doing its things. It was all the same color, black, probably many variants of black, but the light was and the 3D of the strokes, because he was painting also on 3D with the brush strokes. And so the light was making the variations of different blacks, different profoundness. And so it's about engaging our audience through the senses, through the smell, the sight. I was inventing an acronym, SMEFS, which is SMEFS, to see, to move, to ear. Of course, it was not H, it was E, but with the ear, to feel and to smell in the story. So tell us about more about the senses. What do you do to embark your audience through your story or your stories using all their senses?
And really, that's what it is. It's to allow you to immerse yourself with your imagination and understanding that those senses, when triggered by your experiences, can actually help you really be a part of that story, and it can take you through a journey with your imagination. It's really important to use the two, um, the your senses and the imagination, and doing that, placing yourself as the audience member, it's really going to allow you to connect, to engage them, and to have them be engaged immersively because you're using your senses. Um, there's a poem I wrote. It was talking about my upbringing. There was I spent 3 years of my life as an adolescent growing up with an aunt and uncle, and I just wanted to honor them with the lessons I learned during those 3 years. And I really went back in time and just wrote out my impressions of that time. Now that I'm an adult, um, looking back at that time, it really had a big impression on me. But I wanted to bring the reader and the audience into the home that I grew up in. And one of the ways I did that was I used the senses. I talked about how I could smell the baked goods that my aunt would make. She would place it in the oven, and you could smell the sweet bread just wafting through the air into the rooms. And I would just be like, okay, I'm awake now. I'm going to go eat. Right. That was my that was my cue. And I loved it. Right. And that was one of my favorite memories was just having the ability to wake up to something delicious as a kid. We all have our favorite foods and things, and when we talk about smell, we talk about food, when we talk about music, these things, when used in a story, can evoke memories of the person reading your story or listening to the story. You can relate because even though you may not have grown up in a home where you had an aunt or a mom who made baked goods, you know what that smells like if you've ever walked by a bakery, right? If you walk by my goodness, that smell of fresh baked bread. Oh, so enticing. So enticing. You want to walk in and buy that loaf of bread, right? So that's to
I'm
me,
ready. I am ready.
right. And that's really what it is. It's evoking emotions and experiences of the reader and then bringing them into the story that way. And that's really what it is. It's allowing them to be immersed with you as you tell that story.
Well, that's it. It's like when you tell your story, it's like Avatar. You are embarked in the skin of the character, and you are living their lives through their skin. You are teleported like quantum leap. You are zip, teleported in the skin of the persona, and you are living their stories years, decades ago, and you are living the story through them with your senses. And so that's why also it's creating the arc is important also, because the story is not the story has ups and downs, and then, oh, what's going to happen next. So I was also reminding about your anecdote about pulp fiction, and the fact that they were not having a lot of budget, so they realized that they can create tension and attention to things that audience might not see or really vaguely, but they are hearing. So they were using other senses to foster the suspense, the narrative, reminding me. You talked about Pulp Fiction. I was reminding myself about an amazing scene in the Gremlins number 2, and that scene was incredible. It was like in French, ombre chinoise, the Chinese shadows. Do you remember this Gremlins 2 in the laboratory when Gremlins invade the laboratory and drink some potions? And there is a scene that we don't see the flesh, but we see the shadows of the Gremlins that is drinking. Guess what? The spider potion. The spider potion. And so you see the gremlins drinking the spider's potion, but then we don't see the whole transformation, except you see that with the shadows. You see the monster, the shadows, and the gremlins becoming the big spider that we see afterwards. But in the meantime, we see that the transformation through the the shadow. And so through suggestion or through visual effects, we can create incredible tension stories that is irreal. That like another scene I was remembering. In that case, it was really flash to me. I am a big fan about Doctor Who, and especially with the David Tennant period. I was not watching really the Doctors after that, but I remember in the 2010s I was watching David Tennant. He was the Doctor for 5 years, so it was quite incredible, you know. And there was a scene where he was with the Lord. I don't know the character that was playing the villain, and he was aging, and we see the persona aging, voilà, with visual effect, and you see the like Yoda, like 100, 800, 900 years old, like the whole and it was quite impressive. So whether we use visuals or writing to convey suspense, to convey a story, using the words, it's like the words are like the painter palette. The more colors the painter have, and how he adjusts the color on the canvas, that's also important. So and then the next section is dialogue, because you say that the dialogue is the heartbeat of the storytelling when it comes to show and tell. Tell us more about the dialogue, because I have a dialogue with Mr. J right now. So I yield you the mic.
Yeah, before we talk about dialogue, I want to go back a little bit to Pulp Fiction. So Quentin Tarantino really expressed his, I guess, admiration for another iconic producer, and that was the the guy who did Psycho. Right. So, when we talk about his admiration, right, for other iconic producers and Hollywood films, he loved. You mentioned it a little bit. In Hollywood back in the days of black and white, right? They used shadows, and it was called film noir, right? So using shadows instead of actual pictures to show action and to show basically the scene. We saw in the original Psycho movie, now there's been another variation since then, um, where it's the shower scene. And it's the pivotal scene where we really see that, oh, this is really a horrible thing that's happening. And but you don't see the gore. These days, it's all about showing all of the effects in front of you. Back then, one of first of all, practical effects weren't what they are today, and visual effects, digital visual effects, didn't exist at that time in the way that it does today. And so you had to use tricks. And one of the tricks was to let the audience imagine the worst. And how do you do that? You show bits and pieces and let the person, the audience, fill in the blanks. And so Alfred Hitchcock, who's the really iconic producer and director of that time, right? Psycho would basically was innovative for its time, and that shower scene was basically what made it so innovative and why it was so creative. You didn't actually see the knife piercing flesh, but you saw the knife come up, you saw the curtain, you saw the bathroom, and then you saw what looked to be blood going down into the drain. You didn't see the person, you didn't see the gore, you didn't see the actual piercing of skin or anything like that. Nothing really gory. And it was then that Quentin said, this man is genius. He didn't even have to show it, and people were much more afraid. They found horror in not seeing it because your mind fills in the blanks. And so that really is that was kind of his inspiration for that scene I talked about in the book. And again, it's using those words, using ways to convey a scene or a story without actually doing it so up front. You're letting the people use their imagination, and that's really what the point of that was. And so dialogue, right, is just pretty much the same, especially in film. If you can't go to the Sahara Desert and film in the Sahara Desert, right, what you do is you have people, characters in the story, talk about the Sahara Desert. And that's how you fill in the blanks. When that dialogue comes in and there's, hey, Ali, I've always wanted to travel to the Sahara Desert. I hear about these great big sand dunes that go up for miles and then come down for miles, right? And just sand kind of blowing in the wind like tree leaves. And it's amazing to see this in nature. And I just, feeling the arid air, the dryness, and just the heat. You see, what I'm doing is I'm again immersing the audience in the dialogue of a scene that doesn't exist, a visual scene that doesn't exist. I'm replacing that with the dialogue. And this is why dialogue can be extremely important. It can be extremely important as a tool to shorten the gap of the story to allow people to realize this is something that's important, but at the same time, it could also be a tool to save money, right? In film, it because you're not going to these locations, you're not having to build a set, you're not having to take an entire film crew to the Sahara Desert. You're just talking about it. Dialogue like that can be extremely important. The other thing, in talking about stories in Hollywood and in film and TV, these days, dialogue is so important. But on with TV, even today, right? There's only a short amount of time that you can have these scenes play out. So a lot of times it's also about pacing. You want to get out all the things you need to say as an actor and have the dialogue you need to have. So pacing sometimes is extremely fast to be able to have the dialogue to get out the story. And the show I'm referring to that kind of helped propel that kind of pacing with lots of dialogue, but quick, snappy, and to the point was the Gilmore Girls. Now, I didn't watch a lot of it, but the ones that the episodes I did watch, I'm looking at this and going, wait, wait, hold on. Let me just kind of process this because they'll say a whole thing, a whole line of stuff, and you're going, wait, that was pivotal. There's a little bit of something in there. Oh, and then you realize, like after the scene had ended, what exactly occurred because you're having to catch up because the pacing is so quick. So pacing is really important, but it allows people to have the dialogue on TV quickly enough, but to have all the things that need to be said. So I applaud the actresses, the main actresses in that show for having the fast pacing that they did and still being able to have carry emotion and carry out the scene. So I just want to kind of talk about that and show that dialogue is extremely important. So much so, sometimes writers, when you're writing, they include everything so that the story can play out, but you have to talk to the actresses and actors to be able to make sure that they have the right pacing to be able to say all of that within that short amount of time. Um, but yeah, this is really a real important part of painting the picture, setting the scene, bringing people in, and really immersing them in what is going on. Um, and you're right. There's a couple of things that you just need to be aware of. There are pitfalls and perils. Um, you don't overload the narrative because there's a tendency, right? And Gilmore Girls is a good example. Sometimes there's just not enough time. Timing is important, pacing is important. If you write something that is so long, a soliloquy, right? Sometimes getting to the point is much more important than drawing it all the way out, like going to the most minute detail of a scene. You don't want to go to the point where you're laying out every aspect of the room that the character is in, right? Like, unless it's pivotal to the story, you don't want to continue to just like, okay. And he looked towards the dresser, and on the dresser, there was all this dust. And on the dust that was sitting there, there was this candelabra. And on the candelabra, there were these purple candles that were burning brightly. And, you know, you're just going way too deep into the details to try to immerse them. So there's a pitfall and a peril when doing that. You don't want to go overly into the details, the fine details, unless it's truly pivotal to your story. And that's something that you have to consider each time. You know, you want them to be immersed, you don't want them to drown. There's a difference. So
Yeah, it's like putting too much water in your painting color. At the end, it's not a strong blue. They are seeing like more a sky blue, or a blue that is too fade, because it's drawn to the detail. So what is it's the most important is the red line of your story. It's not to put too much detail. So that I was also writing the pitfalls. Leave room for their minds to wander, because it's like why it's really the difference between movies and books, because books, they only read words, so they are percolating words into their brain, and they have probably they have different brains, so they have also different definitions that they think about the words. The way that you describe with words might have hundreds and hundreds of different versions, but in movie we are all seeing the same visual, and there is a little room, less room for our imagination, because the picture is out there. That's why it's also important to bring the imagination through pictures that are not clear. And also, I was reminding myself, I remember movies not only about the pictures, but about the emotions that this movie uh, was embarking me. Like I still love this movie, but less and less. But uh, it's from Stephen King. The book is even more interesting than the movie. But the movie was really amazing, because at some point, like, what I know that there is a scene, and at some point there will be Pennywise that will go out in a form or another through the imprise, the takeover of their minds. Whatever it's about, the scene about the shower. I don't know if you have watched it with Pennywise, Stephen King, the movie. And that was a scene that was incredible with the shower. This little boy being on a large shower, and a shower room, collective shower room, and you see the tubes moving, the tubes of the shower moving, and letting him constrained in the space, because he was not able. And then, oops, there was Pennywise getting out in the room, and I got goosebumps, because although it was not me, I was watching the movie, I was embarking myself in this little kid adventure. Like, will he be able to escape this experience? And so it was even more the move. There was some physical things, but most of the time it was visual and psychological harm. psychological impact. So the dialogue and the fact that they were together as a band, like the survivor, and also the power of visualization through words. Like I was seeking the quote, "We all float down here," like the balloon, in It and Pennywise. So il flotte en bas. That I remember the phrase in French, by the way, and I was like, wow, that was like powerful. And there are many things to say, but I'm going to have a dialogue. So I yield the mic to you. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's really allowing the audience to fill in the gaps themselves and realize for themselves how it plays out, right? The the best thing that could happen to you is for somebody in the audience to come to you and say, "Wow, I know what that's like. I've been there. Um, what you said really resonated with me because whatever, right?" So the impact, right, is when, and the feedback usually when you do something like that would be, "Oh, I was there. I was right there with you. I could feel the sand hitting me as I as you were telling the story about the character walking through the desert in the Sahara Desert and how the wind blew the sand in his face, like, and that it stung him, right? And you can see people actually, I've been to the desert before. I felt that before. Things like that, right? Where it really just allows people to get
But
involved
then I
with
have a
it.
question for you, because for me it's really
Yeah,
important to realize that you talk about the desert. Do I have to have lived an experience in the desert to convey this story, or could I talk about the desert without even having 1 minute of experience me being in the desert? Because I can talk about typhoons and tornadoes, but you lived both. So I truly believe that you are the best person to talk about that, because you were living, you were surviving a tornado and typhoons. I was never experiencing until now, cross fingers, tornadoes and typhoons. So I might not be the best conduit storyteller to talk about the desert or to talk about typhoons or tornadoes. I can talk about my life in my youth in the Ardennes, because I was living my youth in the Ardennes. Uh, and the family speaking Walloon and these kind of things. But talking about typhoons and deserts, I never lived that, so I might not be really the best to convince people to embark in a story about that. What are your thoughts?
that's perfect. It's actually, that is the true mark of a great storyteller. If you have never been in any of these environments and yet you're able to immerse your audience in that environment you're talking about or you're writing about, that makes you a great storyteller. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to be experiencing it to be the great storyteller you can be. Does it help? Absolutely. Right. If you've ever experienced being in any of these situations, obviously it's going to lend credence and authority to whatever it is that you're writing. Okay, he knows what this is about because he lived it. But at the same time, if you have a great imagination and you can draw on your experiences to help you paint that picture, that's even better. You know, sometimes, right, it can be, man, there was a heat wave in Belgium one year, and degrees went up into the 90s, and there was no humidity, and the air was dry. I've never experienced that before. Man, that must be what it's like to be in the desert. I would wake up, and even though my windows were all the way open, and I still felt heat, I could not get away from it. I had my fans on, and I could feel the air, but all the air that was blowing was heat. It felt like I opened up the oven and all that heat rushed out. That's what it felt like. See, you don't necessarily have to be of the location or experience or having that experience at all, but taking from your experiences in your life and kind of imagining what it would be like. Um, that's the mark of a true storyteller, somebody who may not have ever experienced it, but still can tell the story enough that people can relate, people can really place themselves in that story as a result.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hope that answers your
of
question.
course. Because for me, it's like, am I legitimate to talk about the tornadoes? As there is another person in front of me that was living tornadoes. If I am conveying this kind of experience of that I didn't live, and someone in the audience have lived that, you know, and they will say, no, it's not true. It's not like that. You know, it's not like that to experience a tornado. So that, probably it's not about the imposter syndrome. It's about me talking about living in US. Oh, it's about that, and you know, and you say no, it's not like that because I. And then you were never living in US. How come that you dare to talk about something that you didn't experience? So for me, it's about that. You know, it's if I have to convey something, either I will put a warning like, this story is not mine, and this is my approach. You know, these kind of things, like. Um, but I rather prefer to let you speak about how is it about to lead to survive a tornado, and not bringing that story from my own speech, because I never experienced a tornado. So that's my intake. So I love also the keywords that you were painting to us: immerse and vivid imagery, paint, ignite, because it's about ignition. It's like there is a metaphor of bringing the vehicle of the story alive, like when you try to engage with your car, and sometimes it doesn't turn well, like, and then the car is not running. But then after a while, and so it's really to bring the vehicle of the story alive, ignite. And for that, we need multiple ingredients. We need the sparkle, and we need the resource, the gas, the container. So there is the container, which is the story, and there is the way of bringing the story to life, which is the sparkle, like that will ignite. So and creating an experience and knowing the intention. That's why it's, what is the intention of bringing that? When we are crafting a story, we have to reflect upfront, before telling the story, what is my intention? What is my what do I want the audience to take away? What do I want the audience to take action on? Is it about my products, my services, or is it about something that I'm really craving for them to act upon? So, what are your thoughts?
Really, it's You're right. Okay, so going back to the word immerse, right? It's to take somebody and to bring them into the story. That's what I talk about when I'm talking about immersing someone. And I was just thinking about it. The If you don't mind, I want to read the story.
Yes,
The short
yes.
story I was talking about. Okay. So let me see. It's it's the story about me growing up again in this house, and so and then you can tell me where you hear the immersion, right? So in the early morning, I wake up to a new day. It is the dawn of the start of a different life for me. As I stir, the sun rises above the watchful mountains of Meleso. They see my Auntie Charo frying buñuelos lemay, breadfruit donuts. She yells for the kids in the house. Kahulo! Get up, she says. My Uncle Andy sits on the chair at the end of the table. He reads the newspaper and sips his cup of coffee. Without averting his eyes, Uncle Andy tells me to feed the pigs. I respect and fear my Uncle Andy. He doesn't say much, but when he does, I am in awe. Why do you want all those unnecessary things? He would ask. According to Uncle Andy, we only needed three things: the clothes on your back, a roof over your head, and food on the table. I am a transplant, just like the mandioca, tapioca, in the front yard. I stayed here over the summer and became rooted. My father and mother agreed to my decision. I'm still unsure about the whole move. Inside, I'm just a torrent of confusion. My emotions are swishing around in my stomach, churning like the waves near Beely Bay. I still don't know why I left my sanctuary of Mingalao. I'm constantly reminded by older cousins I am a northern boy. Truthfully, I'm from the village of Mingalao, a central village. I must feed the animals before my morning meal. My hands reach up to grab a bucket hung from the rafters, the same hands that reached for nizuk, coconuts, the day before. Nizuk, my ancestors reached for countless times before. These small hands exist because of my ancestors. I'm here because of them, and I'm here because of me. My mind swirls just like the clouds over the Tongan, the trees. Grunts and snorts break my gaze towards the sky. Why must they eat before I? I will never know. At home, I could eat cereal all day. During the summer, I caught punglao, land crabs, for the first time. Like an infant, I experienced many firsts. I don't think I will ever reach my toddler phase. I'm still crawling on my hands and knees. I yearn for more discoveries and knowledge. I'm in wonder as the chickens come when I call. You have to vibrate your tongue and make a whirring noise. Uncle Andy showed me this call through demonstration. I recall the time just weeks before when I went fishing. I stood at the Meleso Pier fishing for ee, juvenile skipjack. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. Through example, I was taught to catch fish. How much more will I learn this way? Learning in much the same way my ancestors did. It is now daylight, and Uncle Andy has left for work. The sky is no longer multicolored and luminescent. I enter the house and the scent of breakfast wafts through the air. Eggs, spam, rice, and the bananas are laid on the table. I'm rushed to eat and to get ready for my first school day. This will be another new experience. Public school. I once wore uniforms and was taught by nuns. I was indoctrinated into a culture just as my forefathers. Catholic school was strict and formal. I would come to understand public school was different. My introduction came early as I rode the bus to school. A young man accosted me. Okay, he teased me. I am, after all, a northern boy, new to Inarahan Middle School. The day wore on in much the same way. I'm happy to return to familiar surroundings after another harrowing bus ride. Auntie Charles greets me with a proud smile and an errand. She tells me I must get food at the store. I walk to 3 stores in search of the item she wants. Looking up at trees all along the road, I think back. How did people of the past travel without cars? I pass a vegetable stand run by a Japanese woman married to a Chamorro. She is known as the Japanese lady. I don't even recall her name. I see mango trees and long to eat pickled mango again. The walk shortens in my mind as I regress to an earlier time. I'm walking through the jungles of Melesso in search of food. I realize the ocean offers many choices. A car honks and I'm whisked back to modern day. I'm offered a ride back home, but I decline. Despite heavy bags and scrawny arms, I stay the course. I do not know then that I will have many future solitary walks. Times like this when I will just reflect on my way somewhere. I will walk to Escuelan Pali, that's CCD, Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, Sunday School. I walk to Melesso Pier. I walk to the basketball court. I walk up Pigua Hill. I will walk towards my destiny. As I remember Melesso, I reflect on my journey. I've taken many roads that have shaped who I am. The road that led me back home to my parents. The road that led me to a career in journalism. The road that led me to relationships. The road that led me to the Guam Gallery of Art, and the road that led me to understand that heritage and culture is important. I'm thankful to Melesso, to Auntie Charles, Uncle Andy, and especially my parents, Julian and Terry, and my ancestors for shaping that young boy into the man I am today.
Wow, I am speechless. It is really delicious, as I love to say. And so, if there is no one that heard this that is not immersed, I don't know what it takes, because you immersed us through words, through visualization, through sound, evocation of smell, the precise scenes, and the words in your language, and the sounds. So that's it's you are the Picasso of the storytelling. Truly, that was an amazing piece, and I will add also emotions that I was feeling sometimes your own emotions, and through that I was taking this energy and becoming my own emotions to imagine that. So what a journey in couple of minutes, you know. That's that's incredible. I think I have still uh, my palette to ignite, and it takes time, it takes tries, and so that's really, you know, the message that I would like to say is that it's never too late to tell your story. It's just chocolate because it's about a decision at the same time. So the man that you are today was having many trials, many doubts, many uh, ups and downs, and now as you are telling yourself, and it's good, even if it's not the case right now, it's good to talk to that in the present tense. You are living through your purpose, through the vehicle of a storyteller, and that it's also to be imperfect. I think if I got to learn a lesson for today is that if I'm waiting to be perfect in order to tell a story, the story will never be told. If it takes for me to try 1,000 times to tell my story, and these are hundred and thousands of imperfect ways of telling it, I rather prefer to tell it rather to wait the moment that I am, yes, you know. It's really the each moment, each minute that we are living will never be back. And so through already more than 2 years, through your shows on the Saturdays, you are doing it. You are conveying your message, your stories through your experience, your journey, and your characters. And the most important, allowing also other to take part. So that's why I'm always a bit sad that there is, probably it's my fault, that there is not so much audience. But guess what? The replay team is always welcome. And the blessings with that, compared to the audio sessions, is that you can use that for as materials for your to say that I'm here, I'm breathing in my body. Probably in 10, 100 years, I will not be, for sure, in 100 years, you will not be alive anymore. But maybe in 2080, we might see a Jay in 2025 telling his stories, like we saw Charlie Chaplin doing his own things decades ago. And so that's what matters. It's like a legacy. So that's why I'm really blessed to hold the space for you, for each rule. And so target practice, immerse vivid imagery, and then stand out against the noise. Because there is a lot of noise out there. And at the same time, it's not, there is a bird. I love to say that. There is a bird. A few years ago, I was hearing David Attenborough talking about this bird in his famous documentaries about animals. And this bird was mimicking all the sounds that this bird was hearing. And what was talking me, but in the bad way, is like we can hear also beep beep, this bird doing beep beep, or you know the sound of the tree, the cutting trees with the jigsaw. And so we can be ourselves. We can do our thing. Being this weirdo paradise bird trying to dance to convey a message or to attract. That's my message. To be yourself. Of course, you can to adjust to your audience. What does your audience need to hear? But at the same time, there is only one Jay. There is only one Ollie. And so I think you can fake to try to be Tony Robbins, oh yeah. But I truly believe that it's better to see Ollie and to see Jay, you know, because they are unique. Both are unique. So, what are your last vibes before I talk about the next sessions that are going to occur next weeks?
You really you really got me with what you just said. I think that, I've said this before. This is this book is several iterations later. Um, the very first time I wrote it, there was like 300 plus pages. And I decided before I was going to go back and edit and work on it some more that I was going to clear out my files. And in so doing, I lost that very first iteration. I deleted it completely. And I said to myself, I'm not doing that again. I am not going to rewrite this book. I just don't want to do it. And I said to myself, well, right now is the most opportune time. We are in the age of AI, and it's so easy to rely on ChatGPT or DeepSeek or whatever it is that's out there. And to come up with something, but to come up with something that's unique to you and your creation and your imagination, even if we're using ChatGPT as a tool, it has to come from you, the human being, first. You're still going to have to write a prompt that's going to spit out something that is going to come to reality. But it comes from you first. It comes from your soul sometimes, if it's an autobiography, if it's a story that's unique to you, really, and your experience. And so I struggled with it and I said, you know what, let me just go ahead and do it. And I agonized over it. And then there were 100 different other iterations afterwards because I kept going back and kept on trying to get it to be perfect. And I didn't want to publish it unless it was. And so there were these dates that I put out originally, and I didn't meet any one of those because I kept going back and wanting it to be perfect. And I found something else that needed to be fixed. I kept going back and no, it's got to be perfect. I'm talking to storytellers, so it's got to be great. It's got to be perfect. And if I kept doing that, the story would have never been told. This book would have never been published. Yes, it's okay to agonize over a book to make sure that it's as good as it can be. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's like what I was talking about earlier with getting into the details. If you agonize over the littlest things, then the big thing of the entire story is lost. You're losing the complete story. It's okay. I'm not saying don't agonize over the details, but if it keeps you hostage and it keeps your story hostage, revisit it. Revisit that feeling and be comfortable with what you already have. Only you can know whether that's you're comfortable or not in letting that reach your audience, your public. And that's why I wrote this. these 10 rules so that you can get to being comfortable enough to put out what you think is of value to your audience. That was the purpose.
Yeah, and let me
So,
tell you that you did well because there is a quote that I love to say. I love Maya Angelou, but there is a quote from her that is really incredible. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Reflects on the deep emotional burden of unexpressed stories or experiences. So that's a quote that is really following me because if I postpone to write my story, I might not be able to write my story. There was a huge awakening already years and years ago, but more than 2 months ago, I lost one of my best friends. And I know that months or 1 or 2 years ago, we were talking about the fact that he might tell his story, write his own book. And I don't know in what process the book is already written or not. Maybe he was writing it, but it's a draft, or not writing it. But there is a great chance that we will never see a book of Axel Kleven, his name, out there. And so no, all we can have is some audio messages that we have from him, some videos. He might be in a live session, but there is no book. And I think this is a loss. For me, it's painful because it's painful to sit down, to be back to my personal story, to feeling I'm still in my vibes of escaping. I'm still in my vibes of uh, living in the moment, like woo woo, this kind of energy of Oli. But more and more, I feel like even if it's a draft, even if it's not published, but if it's written, even if it's voiced, because I truly believe that I can also write my book through my voice and then transcript and then rearrange the script and then, but at least there is a materials. Whatever it's you are writing or making videos about your life, your story, or voice, that's why it's important to not let anything block you. And that's why at least what I'm grateful for is even if I'm not having my book written until now, I was in CJ chapter anthologies. I wrote a chapter in Beyond Boundaries and in Rebel with a Cause, and I was talking about my life and my aspirations, my values. And even if it's 2 chapters, it's better than 0 line, 0 words out there. And that's why I was also really uh, emotional about chess. The fact that I was not reading Jess story, I was listening to it when CJ was expressing it, because I lack of a discipline to write to read the book. That's why I'm doing that, the book club with your book, because if I'm not doing that, I will not be able. Well, I will be able, but it's my decision to later. And in doing that, I'm forcing myself to read chapter after chapter and to make some visuals. I'm good at making some drawings and visuals and to do that because I value your work, because I love the message that you are um, expressing, because I love also that it's important to debunk the myth of a book that you have to read from the page 1 to the last page. That's why I was a few 1 or 2 years ago, I was tapping into Avil Beckford with syntopic reading, and she introduced the concept that a book is a buffet. You don't have to eat the first plate, the second plate, the main dish, the dessert, the cheese. and be no. Okay, what is in this book that I want to focus right now? What is the section that I'm going to focus? What are the parts that I'm going to pick? And that's great. If you are picking just 10 pages of his book and you are applying, good for you. Application, it's really important for me also. So that's why it's also important to bring that to life, and that in 30 years I might not be alive anymore, you might not be alive anymore, but the replay team will be there. And if they choose so, because it's about a decision, there are probably millions and millions of books that were written and that are not read anymore. Do you know, by instance, To Spoil the Sun? I invite you and the audience to read it, and also to me. It's not anymore on paper, I think, but it's still on Kindle. And it's a fictitious story of an Amerindian woman seeing the conquistador invading their land and bringing some illnesses. And so, To Spoil the Sun is about the burning on the skin of the sun. And it was a book that my French teacher was inviting us to read. And there is a version in English, because the original version is L'un jour au soleil in French, To Spoil the Sun, from Joyce Rockwood. To not confund with the recent healthcare person of the same name. But these books that are forging my life, like The Brave New World, also from Aldous Huxley, or The Dictator from Charlie Chaplin. And so these books, these movies, these TV series, there are probably millions and millions of hours, millions and millions of pages. But what do you need right now? What are you going to do in your journey, in your life? What are you going to act upon? Because there are terabytes of videos and millions of pages of books, and we don't need to be invaded and to read them all. So, Mr. J, there is the next session will be a sixth rule: create an air of expectation, and the seventh is use emotion. So, what could we expect the next Monday to live? You are on mute.
Yeah, it's setting the pace. It really is talking about what is going to come next, right? It's just like the music in a horror movie. Right. Right. That's right. You know what's going to happen once you start hearing that music. It's like something big is about to happen. Be afraid or be prepared. Either way, right? So it's really doing that. It's bringing you to a point like, I know that this is going to happen because that music is coming. So it's the same thing. As a storyteller, you've got to kind of give them a little bit of what's going to happen next, because you want them to follow along, right? And you want them to say, oh yeah, I think this is what's going to happen next, right? Renee and I, we have this thing every time we watch a movie. Like if we call something out and it happens, we usually look at each other, and if I said it, oh, that person is going to be the killer. And then it really happens that person becomes the killer. Oh, okay. I look to my wife and I say, I wrote this. Because you already are in that mode where you realize as the audience member, that person is the character we need to watch out for, or this is what we need to expect next. And so doing that it can start at the beginning, it can be, towards the climax, but as long as you're there engaging the audience and bringing them with you by setting that expectation, it's really important. And the other one is using emotion. Whew. Emotions can be extremely engaging. And I mentioned before there was a play that I was in with the University of Guam. And at the university, they I was able to work with the producer and the college students, and I wanted to play this one role. I read the entire play in one night, and there was one character that stood out to me because of one scene. This play took place in World War II, and it happened in one of the concentration camps. It happened in one of the concentration camps. That's the scene, that's the setting of the play. And they were placed in these caves, and my character wanders off looking for food and water, and he happens to stumble upon another cave. And when he enters the cave, he sees family and friends massacred. It's a very pivotal scene. And I'm there trying to immerse myself in that moment of the character. What would he be doing? And I remembered the times I attended a funeral and the grief I saw in the loved ones who still were alive, seeing their loved one pass and be in a casket, and then the casket closing. That's always a real harsh reality that they've gone, that they've passed on to another life. Once that casket closes, there's a finality in it. What would I have done? And I recalled those scenes and seeing family and friends in that state murdered. And so I fell to my knees, I cried, and I asked God, why? That really was the character and that scene and the dialogue that was there, the text that was written. I brought it to life in the character who was just beset with grief, so much so he asked God, why? A devout, faithful Christian, Catholic asking, why? Beyond his comprehension. And in his frailty as a human being, he calls out to a divine being asking, why? And that was impactful to me, but I remember an audience member greeting me at the end and hugging me and thanking me for doing the portrayal of this character. And she said, I've come here each and every time that the play was on. And I just wanted to watch it over and over again because those were the stories of my mom. And more people need to know about it. And so I was just floored that I impacted somebody in such a way that telling this story would be touching to her because it reminded her of her mom and it reminded her of the immense impact that this story had, not just on her, but on our history and on our people.
Thank you. And for me, that's the true definition of success. Because the society might tell us narratives of success, but for me, success is to be able, during the time that we live, to be able to transform lives and to make lives easier to live and to express emotion so that the body is not anymore taking these emotions as disease, but to let it flow and to be more light and to say, okay, I am transformed because of my French teacher. I am transformed because of Jay's stories. I am transformed because of what I'm experiencing and that people are around me helping me to move forward. That's for me the true success, because lives might be 100 years old, might be also a couple of hours, sadly, for young parents, and we never know. But at least even few hours, they were impacting lives of parents, even if babies are already leaving Earth. So for me, it's about to be there as much as we can and to thank God that we are surrounded by incredible people. So thank you, Mr. J. See you next Monday for the 6th rule of engagement, which will be create an air of expectation. So thank you, Mr. J. And keep shining, everyone. What are your last words? Imagine if today is your last day on Earth, what are your last words for your audience?
Tell your story. Rule your story. See that the power of storytelling will live on even if you have passed. Your story is important. Add it to the rest of the fabric of humanity so that we can all share in the unity of our humanity. We are all storytellers, whether we choose to believe it or not. It's in our DNA. Share your story. Rule your story.
Thank you. See you next Monday, and thank you, everyone. Keep shining and listen to your heart. Let your heart beat again and embark you to new adventures.